about those beings that seem to show up within your work. Who are they? How long have you been there?
Well, let's talk about how we could actually see them first, and then I'll talk about them, because I'm not the type of person that ever looks for them. I'm not the type of person that spends a lot of time trying to connect with beings. But think about this: the brain could only see equal to how it's wired. If there's no circuitry for patterns in the brain, then you don't see reality. Right? It's called pattern recognition. So then how do we begin to see things that exist, but we don't have the circuitry to perceive, right? In other words, we don't see things how they are. We see things how we are. Mm-hmm. So you spend the majority of your life narrowing your focus on everything material in this three-dimensional reality. You see objects, you see things, you see people, you see bodies, you see places, and our senses plug us into the three-dimensional reality. So everything that's known to us is wired in our thinking neocortex. So what we're seeing, and it's happened to me so many times, let's say you have a profound mystical experience. There's 4 states of consciousness. There's wakefulness, there's sleep, there's dreaming, and then there's the transcendental moment. Now that transcendental moment is something that we have been working to induce. In fact, we now know we can induce it. We've measured it. We know the pineal gland in certain areas of the brain become active, that the limbic brain all of a sudden moves into high frequencies. And a person has a full-on sensory experience without their senses. In other words, whatever's going on between their ears is more real than anything they've ever experienced before. So if your senses are heightened, right now, if everything you were seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, feeling, if your senses were heightened, your awareness of everything around you would be heightened as well. Well, awareness is consciousness, and you can't have consciousness without energy. So in a sense then, if a person has a transcendental experience and they start interacting with beings that are not physical, if they have that really profound experience, that experience is going to be logged in their brain, because experience enriches their brain, yes? Mm-hmm. The end product of an experience is an emotion, but you wouldn't feel fear from these beings. You would feel a kind of a love or a grace or a presence or an acceptance. And so then you wouldn't be intimidated or afraid of them. You wouldn't throw them into the box of some dogma or superstition. It's a profound moment where you're feeling such profound and intense love that you're leaning in and paying attention to the pictures in your mind. And in a sense, the stronger the emotion you feel from that inner event, the amount of gratitude or love or joy that you feel, the more you pay attention to the pictures in your mind. Now you're branding and embossing new circuitry in the brain. Now, what's the significance of that? Well, when you come back to your senses, to Lilu, now you can perceive a broader spectrum of reality, because you're going to begin to see things that have always existed, but you didn't have the circuitry to perceive them. Mm-hmm. So then, as we activate the pineal gland, it acts like a radio receiver, and those tiny little crystals, as we talked about in our last interview, begin to shimmer. And if a student or a person can begin to tune into energy and frequency, to know how to suppress the mechanism of the neocortex, the memory bank of the known self, to slow their brain waves down into theta, and in that state where the body's asleep and the mind is awake, and you can tune into frequencies and activate that system, that little pineal gland is going to hook into a frequency that's carrying information, and it's known as a transducer, which means it's like a radio antenna or a TV antenna. It's going to translate that frequency into profound imagery. That imagery then is not going to be anything that's known to you. It's going to be something that's outside the scale of known. So when a person comes back to their senses, they're going to perceive a broader spectrum of reality. So I guess about 5 or 6 years ago, I started sensing these presences in the room during our week-long events.
It started at the week-long events.
Well, it started at the 4.5-day workshops. I started, out of the corner of my eye, started perceiving certain things, primarily when we were doing the pineal gland meditations. At other meditations as well, but there was an energy in the room that I noticed, and they're very noble, and they're very interested in what we're doing.
Observing?
Many times in the beginning, they observe. They They are along the walls, and they're not small. They're very, very tall.
How tall?
Most of them probably 3 meters, maybe more tall. I mean, they're beautiful and big, and they have this grace about them and this presence, and they're very interested. They observe, and when I started seeing them and perceiving them, I never really asked who they were. I just observed, and for me. When we do the pineal gland meditations, I'm up at 3 in the morning or 2:30 in the morning, and we're going, and everybody's sitting up and laying down, and I'm awake the entire time, and I'm working with the audience, and I start doing the meditations with my eyes closed while I'm doing it, and a lot of times I open my eyes, and I'm in theta. The door between the conscious mind and the subconscious mind is wide open, and in a sense, I'm dreaming with my eyes open, and all of a sudden I start perceiving things. Well, when that started happening, people started reporting things back to me, and sometimes it was kind of cool because we started getting stories of 2 different people in a room of 1,000 people saying, I saw this incredible thing, and the other person saw the exact same thing. And I saw something very similar. I never said it, but all of a sudden you're starting to get a collective noticing something happening. Well, I was getting ready for the day at one of our events, and as I was waking up and moving around and I was between worlds, they started talking to me. And they said to me, we can only lower our frequency to a certain point. We can't lower our frequency anymore, our energy anymore, because we would change our consciousness. And we love ourselves too much to do that. But if you can raise the frequency of the audience to a higher frequency, we'll meet in that place where that energy intersects. And so there's an invitation or a door for them to move through or to exist as. And
you think they've been supporting your work?
Yeah. I don't know if they directly support my work, but I'll tell you that maybe the better word to use is they approve of it. And there would be like an older sister, an older brother that totally loves you and sees that you're really making an effort. You're making great strides, and they're just a little bit higher on the spiral, in consciousness. And so now, fast forward to a few years later, I don't want to jinx this, it's kind of funny because I don't really talk about it that much, but
it's great that you're opening up to this on that weekend because
because
very interesting.
Because I'm more interested in making a new normal, right? And I would be a doubter if I didn't have those experiences. But now what's happening is that, and this happens kind of wild and inconsistent, and maybe we'll play a couple testimonials of people who have been healed by them, and they are sometimes very aggressive. I mean, very aggressive. Though, in one story, a woman had a severe problem with her hip and her knee, and while she was in the middle of a healing, this being grabbed her leg and shook it really hard, and kept shaking it until it released. And she was yelling in her mind, hey, do you know that hurts? And just kept working it until finally it broke loose. And so I don't know how that happens, but the important point is that it is so real to the person, and that person's leg is up in the air, by the way, while this is going on. Whether it's real or not, if it's the person experiencing it in a lucid state, that it seems so real, then it is real. And the person has a dramatic change in their health. So just because we can't see something with our eyes doesn't mean it doesn't exist. That in fact, this is happening more and more in our work. And what's happening, which is really cool, is that, and we've measured the energy in the room, as you know, so many times in our advanced events, that we are now have a kind of a momentum that's going on. Like,
because the energy must have increased because you're getting better at sharing. I mean, your voice, your tonalities, how you put this, even the music and the surround sound system, everything is contributing, and the intensity of the people participating. I hear that more than 50% of each workshop have already attended a workshop. So that means you have a huge repeat, which the energy must increase each time.
yeah. So we have right now, we just did the statistics on this. It fluctuates. Sometimes it's 50% are people that are first timers, and 50% of people that are just love. They may have come 6 months ago or whatever, and they heard we're doing new things. And because our week-long events are always changing, the one we'll do in Niagara Falls next month will be very different than the one we've done just in Portland, Oregon, or Cancun. But it's super cool because there's a momentum that's taking place, and it used to be like the second or third day where people start breaking through. Now people are breaking through the first day, and now we got a lot of time to do a lot of cool things. And we are actually teaching our student body how to create the very energy in the room for the mystical, to create the very energy in the room for miracles, to create the very energy, to bring that energy to life with our awareness that heals. Because we are going to use that at the end of the week. So we practice all this open focus we've done, become aware of the space, of the room and space. Well, why have we been doing that? Because if we get good at this, then if you're not your body, you're just the awareness of you, and I got 1,500 people tuning into the energy that heals, in that energy, in that space of the room, and they're filling that room. That energy exists, but we have to bring it to life by paying attention to it or becoming aware of it. Just like you have a nose, and if you don't put any attention on it, it doesn't exist for you, but it's always been there. The moment you become aware of it, it exists for you. Well, the quantum field is the same exact way. So we're teaching
beings too.
Of course, because there's a frequency that's consistent with the mystical. And they're actually entering through that portal, through that.
You didn't ask them to come.
I know. Well, some now more, but I invite them. But
You do.
I always invite them, yes, but I don't need to invite them. So now we are seeing, as an example with our healings, we just did an evaluation. We have a physician that's a part of our team, and she's been collecting data with a few other of my leaders. And now we have 80% of the people that come to our events either have a mild, a moderate, or significant change in their health. And when I say significant, I mean complete remission. Now, 30% has a complete remission of the condition in 1 week. Now, that's a pretty good statistic, right? So how it happens, whether there's an interdimensional being that decides to appear and shake someone's leg or do something with that person, the important point is that the person is experiencing something outside of their known neurological network. Yeah. And when they come back to reality, how it happened to them is incidental. The major thing we see, Lilu, is how people feel. Right. In other words, people have a healing, and they're never saying, oh, I was blind and I can see, or I was deaf and I can hear. They spend 10 minutes going, I feel so amazing, I feel so whole, I feel so pure, I've never felt love like this in my life. They're talking, and by the way, yeah, I was deaf and now I can hear. That's, or I was blind and I can see that. Oh yeah, let me just tell you what happens to my body as a result of it. So now all of a sudden it's not so much about the healing, right? It's about the emotional healing that takes place that actually is what's signaling the gene in the first place. So, yeah, they are present.
Are they actually? Did they change? Did the group got bigger? They're more and more loving, or actually, is there a way too that they could be changing? I mean, their energy could change and they could take over. Or is that not at all that kind of group?
These beings are not at all like that. They're not at all like that. These beings are benevolent. They are beautiful. They are graceful. They are noble. They're beautiful. And you wouldn't want to tell them what to do. You wouldn't want to request anything from them. They move with such beauty and grace, and they're interested in certain people at certain times, and they know when it's the right time. So then you go to your physician the next day and you say, yeah, I had all these problems, and yeah, this interdimensional being did this thing to me, and I don't know, and now I'm better. Yeah, doctor doesn't care. All he cares about is you're better, right? And so whatever's happening in that world between wakefulness and sleep, in that transcendental moment, is the most important thing for the person. So they come back to life. They come back to their world, and now they're in a new body. They're in a new life, a new environment, and they're in a whole new time.
Could we say that those beings, or other actually civilization, if we could say, or extraterrestrial beings in other galaxies, are really there to want more and more these type of connection with all of us to support our growth, our evolution, and this is really a time of revelation, we can say, or there's never been a better time for them to show up and support our evolution?
Well, I don't know that they've not always been interested in the human race, but what I do know is the antithesis is also true. That if a person's in suffering, in guilt, in unworthiness, in shame, that's a different energy. And you attract different consciousnesses as a result of that, yeah? And now all of a sudden you, in a sense, have a parasite that's weakening the host, but not weakening enough that it destroys it, right? So you have that happens as well, and just because you have a body doesn't mean you don't have a body doesn't mean you're enlightened, So now you raise the frequency of a person's field, and now they're already there. They're everywhere, and they don't have to. There's a vibrational match. Let's just say that. So I think that when you get to those greater levels of love and you've moved past victimization or importance or control or need to be in power or whatever it is, that when you're at a different consciousness and it's selfless, you get a selfless reflection. And that selfless reflection is going to be a consciousness that doesn't necessarily live in three-dimensional reality, because once energy makes it here, you're no longer bound to the three-dimensional reality. You're connected to a field. So vibrational match, all of a sudden your energy's at that point, and there's a door. And now you're going to get somebody who's going to, in your state of emotional freedom, in your state of bliss or ecstasy or whatever it is, there's a perfect opportunity for a being that's vibrating at a similar frequency to begin to influence a person's future. But by the same means, if you can't get to that point and you're stuck, well, then there are beings that love to feed off emotions and feed off energy. And I've seen those too, because when a person finally gets beyond their suffering or whatever, they no longer can host on that person because they're no longer that emotion, that energy any longer. So then all of a sudden the person experiences a tremendous amount of freedom as well. And yeah, of course, now they're setting themselves up for something else.
Saturday morning, when we're doing the pineal gland meditation, when I walked into the room, I felt this angelic presence everywhere, and I smelled jasmine and rose. And it was I thought that the room was sprayed with something. I was convinced that everyone could smell it. And I wasn't sure what was the second smell, but rose was recognizable to me. And it was just filled with love, if you may. And you know how you smell something, and after a few minutes you get used to it, so you're not aware of it anymore? I could smell it and inhale it every single time I would take a breath in. So that was incredible, but I was not aware that it wasn't the fragrance in the room. So I saw during the meditation that the beings of light, many of them, and I saw them all the way around, holding the grid for all of us. They were guarding all of us, and then there were many angelic presences in the corners. And as that was absolutely incredible, actually, because right during this meditation, I came to awareness that this was my gateway to go home. And I saw a light of being on both sides of me, and I kept telling them that I'm ready to wake up. But the problem was that I didn't want to come back, and I literally told them that I wanted to die in the physical form. The feeling was so strong for me that I completely disassociated with the whole material world altogether. And I just realized how much I've been longing it and how much I've missed it. I become aware of everything. And as we were doing the meditation, and Dr. Joe you know, he was going to the next step. Before he was going to the next step, I knew what he was going to do because I knew that I did it many times before, as if you were watching a Matrix movie and they do the call out. I was like, I know, this is my chance to go. So as I was seeing the beings of the light, and they were really tall and formless, you know, you could just see the silhouettes of them. They were initiating me. And in the end, they didn't let me go because, first of all, my understanding was this is not an agreement. Dr. Joe would never allow anyone to die during this, and that it wasn't my time to go and I have a mission to conclude. But during the same pineal gland meditation, the order of the universe, the coherence of everything, the sacred, everything just, not that made sense, but I remembered everything. It became clear to me. I knew exactly who I was, and like I said, I didn't want to associate with the human form. So, the whole day after that healing, I could smell that fragrance, and I didn't know why. And I kept asking everyone. As soon as we got up from the meditation, I asked my partner Pepe, who I was doing the meditations with. Well, he was my partner through the workshop. I'm like, can you smell it? He says, what? I'm like, the roses. Can you smell the roses? And I asked everyone around, can you smell the roses? Nope, we can't smell the roses. So then what was very interesting that throughout the day, I kept smelling them. And I'm like, maybe there's a fragrance in the hotel. Maybe they're just spraying something. No. And then we had the afternoon walking meditation. And only then I realized what it was. Because I would walk past people and I would smell that essence on some, but not on all. And as instantaneously as I started asking the question, why is this happening? The answer was, this is the fragrance of love and open heart. So the message was, whoever's heart was open, I could sense their smell, that scent on them, which was mind-blowing. And from that day, my ability to smell and sense things is extreme. Everything was becoming clear as we were going through the week. And I recognized a perfect order. Everything is in perfect order. And I also, one more thing, when we're walking in the circle in the coherence healing, to me it became obvious and clear that we are servants. That we are servants to the higher power. Like, I feel like my ego has died and it no longer has place, and it was replaced with wholesomeness and fulfillment and just love, and it's just this feeling of belonging in the family. But I now clearly remember, it's not something I've learned, it's something that I have reminded myself, that we all are extensions of the source, and it's almost like we're little tubes of energy. And when you have an ego build up, it clogs it, right? And that creates misalignment. But when there is no clog, and we're just the channel, which we have to, in a sense, I don't want to say obey, but we, like I say, we serve. We receive abundance of fulfillment and love as an extension of the source. And I'm so humbled by the experience and the reminder of who we are and where we're from.
I was born premature, and I had incontinence from the day I was born. It was 55 years ago, so they didn't really know what to do with babies back then. So my mom would make little tools out of soap and have to dig out, because I was impacted. And so it's really been a lifelong problem, and not one that is really that fun to discuss with people. But by the time I was 28, I had cancer 1B right above my rectum, and got past that. And then when I was about 52, I had a complete metabolic breakdown. And it makes me laugh because you hear those videos where you hear people, I was doing the wheatgrass, and I was doing the organic and skin brushing and keto and vegan and, air baths and cold water plunges and, acupuncture, massage, because I couldn't eat anything. Like I couldn't eat gluten, I couldn't eat nuts, I couldn't eat bread, I couldn't, the list just kept getting more narrow and more narrow. And I used to laugh and say I was on the air diet because that's about the only thing I could eat at the time. And I was having really severe rashes, and went to all kinds of doctors, and I got thin shamed, I got accused of being a drug seeking, somebody who was maybe promiscuous in their youth, and I was seeking drugs because I was so thin at the time. So, I just couldn't find any answers, and I would end up in the emergency room, and I would just be trembling because it would have been so long since I ate. I get a little emotional. So, I just kept hearing the word meditate, and I didn't know anything about meditation. My background is Christian background, so I heard Wayne Dyer say something, like he quotes somebody that says if the night wakes you up, get up to see what it has to say. So I just said, not knowing anything, I'm just going to get up in the middle I'm going to hang my robe on the door and get up in the middle of the night and just meditate. So I would hang my robe on the door, and I would wake up 111, 222, 1234, 1234, and I would just get up and I would go in the living room and just lay down, on my, just with my face down, and I started to really have some interesting experiences. And so happenstance, synchronicity, somebody told me about Dr. Joe. So I wasn't doing his meditation, but I started to really read, and I probably watched every YouTube video that was on YouTube. And so finally, January 2nd of 2019, I started the progressive workshop, and I started getting up and doing Dr. Joe's meditations at 3:40 to 4:15 every morning. And during that time, I realized that something interesting. I didn't have any memories before 9 years old, and I just thought I had a poor memory. I didn't know. And both my parents have passed away, and so doing the meditations, I realized that I had suppressed a memory of being molested from 4 to 9, and I was so surprised. Like it literally, how I found out is I had a vision, and it was like on a reel-to-reel movie where I saw what happened to me, but literally there was no charge. Like I didn't have an emotional charge, but it explained to me why I was having all of this anxiety. And what I love so much about Dr. Joe's work is this is my interpretation of what he says. We don't have to go digging up bones, meaning, I didn't feel like I needed to go excavate what happened to me or talk to the person who did it, or, I just had the awareness, and I didn't even have to name what was coming up on the inside of me because of the freedom of Dr. Joe's teaching. So, from January 2nd to Niagara Falls, I had so much revelations on, why I was the way that I was. And I really was so shocked that I couldn't even say molested in the beginning. I would say a victim, or I was abused, or, but I could just really tell that, I was beginning to get free, and the incontinence and the anxiety and the not being able to eat food and all that was just a safety mechanism and a control mechanism. And, it was just running its course. My body couldn't take it anymore. I would eat and not run and not sleep and, on the air diet. And so, anyway, so fast forward to Niagara Falls, and I didn't know how the events were at all. In Niagara Falls, it was a lot of people. And so for the first 3 days, I really hated it. I was like, I don't like Dr. Joe. I don't like this work. I don't want to go home. It's horrible. Like I'm uncomfortable. I can't shut my mind up. And so on Thursday, I got to have the heart rate monitor. And I think it was the walking meditation that day. Might have been Thursday or Friday, but anyway, I had the heart rate monitor on and I did the walking meditation. And for me as a Christian, snakes are a bad thing. Like literally, the snake was in the garden and blah, blah, blah. And so when I was reading the book and listening to people I thought it was a metaphorical snake, well, during the walking meditation, I had the snake. I became very aware of the coiled snake in my first center. And it began to do this during the walking meditation. And I was so alarmed because I thought it was metaphorical. I didn't realize it was like a real energy. And so I had to go as far away as I could from people. I ended up back by a dumpster and I was trying to stop a freight train. Like I was screaming and I was crying and I was confused and I was excited and I didn't even know what to do. So anyway, needless to say, I had this freight train of energy come out of my first center, up in my second center, up in my third center, exploded in my heart, all the way up, out the top of my head. And I mean, I could not hug people. Like my heart, for the first time in my life, it was blown open and everybody was so beautiful to me. And I ran into Dr. Carla on the bridge and I didn't know that, I didn't make the connection. And I said, I saw you do the breath work on the stage and I want that. And, so she began to explain to me what she does with the breath work. And, she says, and now that I've had more of Dr. Joe's teaching, he says too that, you go home from the heart. So anyway, the rest of the Niagara Falls, I went for it. I saw those people on the stage. I saw them do the breath work. My heart was open. And I pulled that energy up from that was stored in my first and second center. And I just, I was going for it. And so on Friday of Niagara Falls, I had this fractal cross and it was like way far away. And I kind of had to throw the baby out with the bathwater with the Christianity a little bit because I'd been hurt over some things and I still love the divine and I still, thought Jesus was the reason for the season, but I had to put some of it away. So anyway, I'm just because of the awakening and all of a sudden I look up and there's this fractal cross. And it's like, bang, 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 bang. I really didn't know what fractals were. It was like, da, 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 da. And it backed up and it was pulsing like a heartbeat. And it backed up and it came rushing at me at the speed of light. And it blew up in my heart. And I mean, my whole being, there was density in my heart. And I think it was like protection. It just blew my heart wide open, like wide open. So that was my other experience. And then on Friday and Saturday, I got the 2 coins that I got that day were wholeness and wholeness. And so I had signed up for a healing, but I didn't think I was going to get one. And if I got one, I was thinking about giving it to my friend because I felt like, I can manage my situation. And my situation at that time was, and, this is not like the best conversation, but I literally hadn't gone to the bathroom normally in 2 years. Like I had to laxatives didn't even work. So I literally had to do a very hot water colonic to myself every day, and it took 2 hours. So if we had a meditation at if I was to be downstairs at 3:30, I had to get up at 1:30. Or if we had to be there at 6, I had to get up at 4. I couldn't have a roommate. Very hard for me to travel. So it was but I felt like I could manage it. And as long as I could keep doing the work, maybe I didn't feel worthy basically of getting a healing. So anyway, I got the wholeness coin. And the day before I got the coin, one of the girls in my meditation or in my group said, I just had a vision of you with white rose petals all around your your face. And so I didn't think anything of it. So I got the healing coin, and it also said wholeness. So I was like, okay, 3 times the charm. You know, I must be meant to get this, this healing. So I'm going to go for it. And so I knew that I just felt like I was destined to have an interaction with the blue beings. I would say they were divine, angelic. I don't know, you know, whatever people want to say that they were. But I knew that I was destined to have an interaction with them. And I just was really afraid that my analytical mind was so strong that I wouldn't be able to do it. So I was like, I'm not going to eat and I'm not going to sleep very much because Dr. Joe says, you know, that if you're tired and you're goofy, you know, that's when the mystical can happen. So Saturday night I slept just very little, and Sunday didn't eat. So I had my healing on Sunday, and I go into the healing room and there's white rose petals all over the floor. And so I just, you know, I knew. And so when you get in that room, like the power is so strong in there. And Dr. Joe takes such good care of getting us ready. Like I literally, my whole body was vibrating, you know. So we go into the healing, and I'm really like, ooh, like, I don't know, you know, will I be able to, if the blue beings, if they show up, will I be afraid? And so this just shows you how much the divine takes care of us. So I get in there, and right away, like my body I felt like it was bouncing like a basketball off the ground, and all of a sudden this curtain appeared, and it was like a gold shimmering curtain with diamond flecks in it. And these blue hands come out from behind the curtain, and they start working on me. And I knew that it was because I had fear. And so I said, I surrender. Like, I'm going to surrender. So they came out from the curtain. And I don't know if you've ever seen the cartoon where they take somebody by the ankle and they lift them up, and their head is hanging down and all the coins fall out of their pocket. So there were 2 of them. And they picked me up and they started shaking me. And like, I could not duplicate the positions that my body was in. Literally at one point I was on my tailbone, and my head was all the way back, and my legs were up in the air, and they started pulling what looked like intestines out of my body. And I was like, I said to them, are you kidding me? You're going to pull that out of me now in front of all these people? And they, you know, they're very to the point. They said, the people's eyes, or how'd they say, their eyes are closed, you're fine. And they just kept pulling and pulling and pulling them. And it was painful, you know, it was painful because that was stuff that had been in there for a really long time. So then, you know, they threw me onto my right hip. And I was literally balancing on a spot on my hip about that big up in the air. And my arms were, and they started taking a shunt, and they were jabbing it into my kidney. And I was like, I said, are you kidding me? What are you doing? That hurts. And they said, your kidneys function slow. And so then they whipped me around like a rag doll, and they did the same thing to the other side. And I'm a marathon runner, so I had been suffering with an encapsulated toe joint that I didn't even think about. And so they said, point your toe as hard as you can. So I pointed my toe as hard as I could, and the energy that was in that toe joint shot up into my calf, and my foot contorted to the side like this. And I don't even know how it did it. I don't know how my ankle bone didn't break. And all the energy went up into my calf. And they reached in and they grabbed it out of there. I mean, and they shook me around a few more times. And, you know, this is like, I don't know how long. It's not that long. And they gave me the once-over, the Blue Man Group once-over. And so after that, I literally felt like I was hollow inside. And so there was a woman who was, you know, one of the healers. I asked her if she would hold me. Like, I just needed like physical touch. And so she held me. And the interesting thing is, I went through, this sounds weird, but I went through wormhole. And you know how Dr. Joe has the timeline, you know, like your past, your present, and your future, and then he flips it up like this? I became very aware that now is past and future is now. And so I went through this portal back to when I was actually in my mother's womb. And by this woman holding me, it like provided this glorious refilling of energy. And it took me all the way up to the present moment. And as a matter of fact, you know, she and I have become friends. She found me after the group, and, you know, she was witness to like some of the positions that I was put in. She was like, oh my gosh, this is what she said. She said she was with her mother when her mother passed away, and how I was struggling and the groans that I was making and the way my hands were was like when her mother died. And I know that the old self died. You know, I know the old self died and the new person was born. And so anyway, I forgot one thing. The day when I had the heart rate monitor on, the day before or 2 days before my healing, it was right before I woke up, and my dad, who died in 2008, came to visit me, and in my hotel room, and he was standing beside my bed, and he used to call me Poopsie, and he said, Poopsie. He said, if I had known what had happened to you, I would have protected you. He said, but I didn't know, and I want you to know. Your mom and I are orchestrating your healing. So anyway, I have the healing. I go home. For 3 days, I literally, like when my husband would come to hug me, I would be like, ooh, because I had this energy emoting, like my pupils were dilated, and I was like, gag, 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 gag. And I didn't have very good words. But on the 3rd day, I started to have normal bowel functions. And it's never happened in my life. I have never in my entire life been able to not have incontinence without aid. And since Niagara Falls, no problem. I can eat pizza, I can eat cheese, I can eat nuts, I can eat gluten. Now I don't, but I tried all those things when I got home. Like, you know, I said, oh, I can't have cheese, it'll slow my log ride down, is what I would call my colon, a log ride. And so I have no problems, like zero problems. So what happened to me, I'm sorry, this is so long, but okay, so what happened to me is I came home so committed to the breath work, and the beings began to work on me at home. So I still have been getting up between 3:40 and 4:15. I did all of 2019, and I'm still doing every day into 2020. They followed me home, and they began to work on me at home. Sometimes they're kind of more crystal color than blue. In the beginning, they were blue, but they began to talk to me about the breath work and how important that is. And so sometimes they will actually blow on my frontal lobe and cool my frontal lobe down, because I know I was in such survival mode from the day I was born, obviously, or maybe even before. And sometimes they would work on my kidney, and sometimes they would tell me what to do. They would say, now I want you to, you know, go inside your kidney, and they would give me instruction. And so, you know, my analytical mind one morning was just thinking, like, you know, I wonder if God does breath work. And I heard this booming voice said, I am breath. And it was like, oh, you know, every one of my cells was like zzz, going, and like, and then all of a sudden I felt like I was breathed, like the universe breathes, and I was breathing, with the divine was breathing, and I realized like how important the breath work, and they began to explain to me, in combination with things that Dr. Joe said and Dr. Carla said, that when we do the breath work, you're literally creating space for the divine. And wherever you have like density, that you literally can bring that breath into that density and blow that density out. And so I have had so many unbelievable experiences with the breath work and the meditation. And for me, the healing is of biblical proportion. It's the parting of the Red Sea, because I'm 55 and I suppressed a memory for 51 years. And I've never in my life had normal bowel function, and I have that now. And not only that, I had such an edge to me, and a lot of times I could be in love, but the hard edge would come up, and I didn't like it, and I knew it wasn't who I wanted to be, but I had no idea of why that was. And so all of those barriers got broken down. But I have two more things I want to say. One is, after I got home, I invested in myself and did the report that you get, and you have a 1-hour consultation with Dr. Carla. She was so helpful to me. But God's so good, or the divine so good, or source is so good, is that when I had the heart rate monitor, my mystical experiences were recorded on it. And so when you get home and you've had something like that, you're like, did I make that up? Like, could this really be? And so when I had the awakening during the walking meditation, so when I got the report, it was several weeks before I talked to her, I thought, my heart must be in horrible shape, because I didn't understand. So I had my consultation with her. So when I had the awakening, you could see, and then, when we did another meditation, you could see. And then when she said, this is when you're sleeping and something happened here right before you woke up. It was my dad coming to visit, was on there. So anyway, for me, the breath work and Dr. Joe's work is more important than sleep. It's more important than food. It has so changed my life. And so you fast forward. Side note, also not a popular thing to talk about. I'm 55, I'm postmenopausal. With the breath work, I have become when you're menopausal, things change, right? And I would watch Dr. Joe and I'm like, he looks younger. Like when I look at him and what the bleep, and I look at him, and he looks younger, and I want that. That's what I want. So as a side benefit, an unintended consequence, in America, we have a saying, get your head out of your ass. It's not a very nice thing to say, but literally my head was in my ass, because I was never able to get the energy here. It was literally my head. Okay. So normal bowel function, beginning to, continually day after day, sometimes twice a day, pulling the breath into my first 3 centers. Unintended consequence, things started to bloom in my first 3 centers, like before menopause, and that's about as much as I'll go into it. So those females who, we know what we know happens, unintended consequence, it's marvelous. So I come to Munich. I haven't had a rash since I started doing the Dr. Joe work, and I break out in a horrible rash, like terrible, terrible rash. And I was like, what the HE double hockey sticks? Like the minute I get to Germany, I call my husband, I made a mistake, I want to come home. So I knew something big was going to happen. And, my husband's very used to my stories about, I saw this and I went there. But this was like another walking meditation. And when I always hated the sound of my voice. Like when I would hear myself, I had a small TV show, when I hear myself on my TV show, or I would do an interview, I hated the way my voice sounded. And I didn't really think much about it, but it came to me yesterday. When you've been victimized and you tell people and they don't do anything, you begin to distrust the sound of your own voice. So, anyway, the rash broke out in my 5th center. And this sounds like it's bad, but it's really good. what happened to me. So I'm on the walking meditation, and for me, the walking meditation started in Niagara. So I'm on the walking meditation, and all of a sudden, like this little room right here in my fifth center goes out like that, and it's like it was pressurized, and the lid of it opened like, and it opened up, and the most rancid air came out of it and came out of my mouth, and it was literally a mist that came out of my mouth, and it was terrible. And I was like, wow, that's weird, you know, and I know it's because my voice was shut off. I mean, the people that I told what was happening to me, you know, didn't have the tools or weren't able. It was a different time. And so I began to stifle my own voice. So anyway, I was like, yay, I had another, you know, I was marching and I was stomping and I was crying and I was so happy, you know, yay, maybe now I'll like my voice and this is wonderful. And so anyway, I just, you know, again, I was like, I felt like my fifth center, all of the cells were synchronized, like zzz, 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 zzz. So we do the meditation, and, you know, I'm excited because I'm going to, you know, do another Dr. Joe meditation. During that meditation, all of a sudden, it looked like a pewter sunflower. And somehow it had a mechanical opening. It was like a kind of like a trick toy box or something. It opened and it went zzz, like that. And a scarab came out of it and went up, and it went in my nose, and it went up my sixth, up my seventh, and out the top of my head. And I knew that my temple, my voice had been resurrected. It was amazing. And then it happened on my left ovary. Sunflower, zzz, scarab came out. Doo, 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 doo. It didn't go inside me, but it went up and out. And so I know that the rash for me represents, it's shameful. You feel embarrassed. And I know for me that the shame that was locked in my fifth center has been resurrected. So I'm so thankful for this work, and I'm so thankful for Dr. Joe, and I'm so thankful for the people here that, you know, are so helpful with the breath, Dr. Carla, the environment. I mean, it literally, I feel like I'm living a biblical parting of the Red Sea, part James Cameron, sci-fi, Avatar, you know, divine-filled life as a result of the work that I'm doing.